They said my time was over, that a mother-in-law like me didn't belong anymore. After my son got married, my daughter-in-law shut me out, abandoned me, erased me from their lives. But what they didn't know was I wasn't finished yet. This is the story of how I found my strength, reclaimed my family, and learned that love doesn't have to break you, it can make you stronger. If you've ever felt forgotten or abandoned, this one's for you. I still remember the day Marcus told me he was going to get married. It was one of those moments I thought I had dreamed about 1,000 times over, the kind of moment a mother holds on to all her life. I'm Lillian, 65 years old, a proud Black woman from a small town in the South. I raised Marcus on my own after his father walked out when Marcus was just a toddler. I thought, maybe, just maybe, after all the years of struggle and sacrifice, I was about to see my family grow in a new way. Marcus was my firstborn, and my world revolved around him. From the time he was a baby, I did everything I could to shield him from the harsh realities of life. My hands were worn and tired from working double shifts at the hospital, cleaning houses, and sometimes babysitting just to make ends meet. The nights I spent awake, worrying about whether we'd have enough money for food or rent, were endless, but I never once showed Marcus the weight of those burdens. I wanted him to grow up feeling safe, loved, and hopeful. He was my light. So when Marcus came to me one afternoon, sitting on the porch steps with that shy smile on his face, telling me he wanted me to meet Jasmine, I felt my heart swell with happiness. Jasmine. The name sounded like a promise. He said she was kind, smart, and had a heart as big as his own. I wanted to welcome her into our family with open arms. The first time I met Jasmine was at a small cafe downtown. She wore a bright smile and her laughter was warm, easy. I remember thinking, this girl could be the daughter I never had. We talked about everything, from Marcus's childhood to our favorite recipes. She told me she wanted to be a teacher someday. The way she looked at Marcus, with so much love and admiration, made me hopeful that maybe, this time, my son had found someone who would cherish him. The months that followed were filled with wedding plans and excitement. I helped Marcus pick out his suit, and Jasmine asked me to help choose flowers and decorations. For once, it felt like the family I'd always dreamed of was coming together. The day of the wedding was a bright, sunny Saturday in June. The church smelled of fresh lilies and white roses. The choir sang softly as Jasmine walked down the aisle, radiant in her flowing white dress. Marcus's eyes glistened with tears as he took her hand. I sat in the front row, tears streaming down my face, feeling proud and hopeful. This was a new beginning. Not just for them, but for me, too. After the ceremony, we gathered for a small reception at the community hall. Everyone laughed, danced, and shared stories. I watched Marcus and Jasmine, hand in hand, surrounded by friends and family. I thought, this is it. We're family now. This is what I prayed for. But sometimes, life's blessings come wrapped in unexpected challenges. In the days following the wedding, I noticed things began to change, subtly at first. Jasmine, once warm and inviting, started becoming distant. The phone calls that were once frequent turned into quick exchanges. Visits grew fewer until they stopped altogether. I remember the day I dropped by their house unannounced. I wanted to bring a plate of my famous sweet potato pie, hoping to share some comfort and maybe catch up on wedding stories. But when I knocked on the door, no one answered. I tried calling, but the phone went straight to voicemail. That night, I sat alone on my couch, clutching the pie tin, wondering what had changed. I reached out to Marcus, but he was always busy, always tired. His once open heart seemed closed off. I told myself maybe they were adjusting to married life, busy with new responsibilities. Maybe Jasmine just needed time. But as days turned to weeks, the silence grew heavier. One evening, I called Jasmine, hoping to hear her voice. She picked up, but her tone was cold, clipped. "Hi, Mrs. Lillian, I'm busy right now." And then she hung up. My heart broke a little more that day. I found myself sitting at my kitchen table one morning, staring at a faded photograph of Marcus when he was 5 years old, smiling with a missing tooth and curly hair tousled by the wind. I whispered to the photo, "What's happened to my family? Why am I left out?" The loneliness was crushing. My phone sat silent. Invitations to family gatherings stopped coming. It felt like I had been erased from their lives, like the woman who raised Marcus was no longer welcome. I talked to my best friend Ethel about it. Ethel has been my rock for decades. We grew up together, faced struggles side by side, and she never judged me for my pain. She said, "Lillian, honey, sometimes when a woman marries, she wants to start fresh. She wants to build a home just for her and her man. It's hard, but it happens." Hearing that hurt, but it also made me think, had Jasmine really erased me like that? Did Marcus let it happen? I remembered all the nights I stayed up worrying about how to keep Marcus safe, how to protect him from heartbreak. Now I felt my own heart breaking. Weeks turned into months. The holidays came and went with empty rooms and silent phones. Christmas morning was the hardest. I sat alone in my little apartment, watching the snow fall outside the window. I wrapped presents for Marcus and his daughter, Tiana, who I hadn't seen in months. The lights on my small tree twinkled softly, but there was no warmth in my heart. I reached for my phone and dialed Marcus's number again. It rang and rang, then went to voicemail. I left a message, voice cracking. "Son, it's your mama. I love you. Please call me." Days passed with no answer. In those quiet moments, I felt invisible, forgotten, but I refused to let the pain swallow me whole. I told myself, "Lillian, you've been through worse. You are strong. You will get through this." I started to pray more, leaning on my faith for comfort. I woke up every morning and reminded myself that my worth was not tied to anyone else's acceptance. One day, I picked up a flyer for a community college class on creative writing. I always loved to write, but never had the time. Maybe it was time to try something new. I signed up on a whim, hoping to find a new purpose. Going to class was scary at first. I was older than everyone else by decades, but the other students welcomed me warmly. I found joy in putting my thoughts on paper, telling stories that had lived inside me for years. I also joined the local church choir. The music filled the empty spaces in my soul. Singing with others reminded me that community still existed, that I wasn't truly alone. Volunteering at the food bank became another lifeline. Helping others who struggled like I had reminded me that pain is universal, but so is resilience. Then, one afternoon, a knock at my door surprised me. I opened it to find Tiana, Marcus's little girl, standing shyly with a small backpack. Her eyes were full of hope and nervousness. "Grandma?" she whispered. Tears welled up as I pulled her into a tight hug. In that moment, I realized family isn't just about the blood that ties us. It's about the love that refuses to break. That was the beginning of healing. Slowly, Marcus reached out too. He told me how hard it was to balance his new life and how overwhelmed Jasmine had been. He admitted he should have called more. We all made mistakes, but we also learned that family is worth fighting for. Looking back now, I see that day Marcus told me he was getting married wasn't just a new chapter for him, it was a turning point for me too. I had to learn how to stand on my own, to find new ways to love, and to accept that sometimes the people we love most may drift away, but the strength inside me, that's forever. The silence and the storm within expanded. After the wedding day's bright promises faded, the silence settled in like a heavy fog, thick and unyielding. Days turned into weeks, and weeks bled into months without a word from Marcus or Jasmine. It wasn't just the quiet phone lines or the unopened doors. It was the cold absence of family that cut the deepest. The feeling of being shut out of the one family I had worked so hard to build was like a wound that refused to heal. I remember sitting in my small living room, clutching the phone as if it were a lifeline, waiting for it to ring. But it never did. Some nights the phone would sit there, silent and still, mocking me with its quiet. The silence felt like rejection, like my love wasn't enough. Sometimes I would replay every conversation, every moment with Jasmine and Marcus. I'd ask myself, did I say too much? Did I say too little? Was I overbearing? Or worse, was I just no longer wanted? I began to doubt myself, spiraling into endless cycles of what if and if only. The nights were the worst. I lie awake in the dark, staring at the ceiling, wondering how the people I loved the most could leave me feeling so invisible. At times, I'd catch myself talking aloud to the empty room. Marcus, Abby, where are you? Why are you letting her push your mama away? The walls held my tears in their silence, and the night sky bore witness to my broken heart. It was in those quiet, lonely moments that I felt my spirit weakening, but something inside me refused to break completely. Trying to keep my mind busy, I filled my days with chores and errands. I cooked extra meals to donate to neighbors, cleaned the apartment from top to bottom, and spent hours in my small garden tending to the plants. Yet none of that could fill the hollow where their love once was. The loneliness gnawed at me like a relentless storm. My granddaughter, Tiana, was the only bright spot left in my life. At 6 years old, she was full of life and curiosity. Before the silence took hold, she'd call me Grandma with such joy it felt like sunshine breaking through clouds. We shared stories, laughter, and secrets. But even her visits became fewer and farther between, caught between her parents' conflict and the tension that hung heavy in the air. One afternoon, seeking comfort, I went to the park where Tiana and I used to play. The swings creaked in the breeze as I sat on the worn bench, staring at the empty playground. I remembered pushing Tiana so high she'd laugh until her belly ached. That memory was bittersweet now, reminding me of what I lost. As I sat there, a kind older woman named Rosa approached me. She carried a small bag of groceries and had gentle eyes that seemed to understand pain. "You look like you've been carrying the weight of the world, honey," she said softly. I smiled weakly and nodded. It's been a hard season. Rosa sat beside me and said, "Sometimes sharing the burden helps lighten the load. If you ever want to talk, I'm here." We struck up a conversation, and before long, Rosa and I became friends. She had lost her husband years ago and knew what it meant to feel abandoned by those you loved. She listened without judgment and shared her own stories of loss and survival. Through her, I learned that pain, though isolating, is also universal, and that gave me the courage to open my heart again. One evening, Rosa invited me to a local support group for seniors facing loneliness and family estrangement. At first, I was hesitant. The thought of walking into a room of strangers, admitting that my family had turned its back on me, was terrifying. But loneliness is a powerful teacher. One night, summoning every ounce of courage, I walked into the community center. The room was filled with people of all ages, each carrying their own stories of loss and heartache. We shared tears and laughter, stories of broken promises and hopes for better days. For the first time in months, I felt seen and heard. One evening, after a meeting, I sat with Marlene at a nearby cafe. She looked at me with eyes full of empathy and said, "Lillian, you're stronger than you know. You raised a son who loved you once, and that love hasn't disappeared. It's just hidden beneath the pain." Her words planted a seed of hope deep inside me. Meanwhile, my relationship with Marcus remained fragile. When he finally called, his voice was heavy with guilt and confusion. "Mama, I'm sorry. Jasmine and it's complicated. She's scared of losing me to the past, to my old life. But I'm your son and I love you." Hearing him say that didn't erase the hurt, but it reminded me that beneath the silence, love was still there. Despite the cracks in our relationship, I had to face the truth that my happiness couldn't depend solely on Marcus. I had to find it within myself. That realization was both terrifying and liberating. I began spending more time at the community center, where they offered classes in everything from painting to yoga. I signed up for a beginner's painting course, curious to see if I could express the emotions I couldn't put into words. The first time I held a brush, my hands trembled with uncertainty. I was clumsy, unsure of where to start, but the colors and strokes became a language of healing. I painted scenes from my childhood, the old farm where I grew up, the porch where Marcus took his first steps, a hopeful sunrise breaking through stormy skies. The other students encouraged me, complimented my work, and helped me feel seen beyond my pain. Music also became a refuge. Rosa invited me to join the church choir. Singing hymns with a group of faithful souls reminded me I wasn't alone. The harmonies lifted my spirit, and the weekly rehearsals became a source of community and strength. There was power in raising my voice, even when my heart felt heavy. One day, while volunteering at the food bank, I met a young mother named Simone. She reminded me of myself years ago, tired but determined to make a better life for her children. We talked about family, hardship, and the importance of resilience. Helping Simone and others gave me purpose beyond my own pain. It reminded me that even in the darkest times, there is light to be found in service. Slowly, I began to rebuild. I made peace with the fact that Marcus's family had changed, and though I loved them, I couldn't force my way back into a space where I wasn't wanted. Instead, I found new families, friends who became sisters, neighbors who became kin. But even as I found strength, there were moments of deep sorrow. Nights when I'd wake up crying, clutching my Bible, begging God for answers. Times when I questioned whether my sacrifices had been in vain. Yet with every tear shed, I grew stronger. Then, one chilly autumn afternoon, my doorbell rang. When I opened it, there stood Tiana, clutching a small drawing she'd made. "Grandma?" she whispered, eyes bright but hesitant. I pulled her into my arms, tears streaming down my face. Her innocent words broke through years of pain. "I miss you," she said softly. That moment was a turning point. It reminded me that love can survive even the deepest wounds. From that day on, I made a promise to myself and to Tiana that I would fight for our family, no matter how broken it seemed. Marcus and Jasmine reached out more often. We had difficult conversations, filled with tears, apologies, and honesty. It wasn't easy, but it was healing. Through all the heartbreak and healing, I learned that abandonment doesn't define me. I am more than a mother-in-law forgotten. I am a woman who loves fiercely, who has survived storms, and who still dreams. And that, my friends, is the beginning of true strength.
Rebuilding bridges and rising stronger. Life has a way of testing us, sometimes when we least expect it, sometimes when we feel we've already given all we have to give. After the storm of silence and heartache, something inside me stirred. It wasn't the sudden return of joy or the instant healing of wounds. No, it was something quieter, something deeper, a stubborn flicker of hope that whispered, "There's still a way forward." I started waking up earlier in the mornings, greeting the sun like an old friend. I'd brew my coffee slowly, savoring the aroma, and sit by the window watching the neighborhood wake. Life moved on, and I was determined to move with it, not behind it. The days of waiting by the phone, hoping for a call from Marcus or Jasmine, were over. Instead, I began to focus on myself, not in a selfish way, but in the way a mother needs to nurture her own soul when the children have flown from the nest or shut the door. I enrolled in more classes at the community college. Creative writing had sparked something inside me, but now I wanted to learn more about history, culture, and even digital technology. At 66, I was stepping into new worlds. I met all kinds of people, some half my age, others older, who welcomed me like family. My classmates teased me gently for being the wise owl of the group, but they also listened when I shared my stories. In their faces, I saw reflections of my own struggles and dreams. Still, the hardest part remained, rebuilding my relationship with Marcus. One chilly autumn evening, I sat on the worn bench outside my apartment, a letter in my hands. It was from Marcus, the first real letter I'd received since the wedding. His handwriting was messy, but heartfelt. He wrote, "Mama, I'm sorry for the silence. Jasmine and I have had struggles, and I was scared to face the truth. But I miss you. I miss my family. Can we start over?" Reading those words, my heart ached and soared at once. That night, I prayed for strength to forgive and courage to rebuild what had been broken. Forgiveness wasn't easy. It never is. It meant setting down my pride and pain, reaching across a divide that felt wide and uncertain. I decided to write back. I poured my heart onto paper. "My son, I love you more than words can say. I have missed you every day. I understand we all make mistakes, but love can heal. I'm here, waiting with open arms." Weeks passed before Marcus called. The sound of his voice brought a mixture of relief and nervousness. We talked for hours, tentatively at first, then with more openness. He told me about the pressure he felt to choose between his wife and his mother, and how lost he was in trying to keep everyone happy. "I never wanted to hurt you, Mama," he said, voice breaking. "I just didn't know how to fix what was broken." "I know, baby," I said softly. "We'll fix it together." Rebuilding the relationship wasn't an overnight miracle. It took patience, tears, and honest conversations. We talked about boundaries and respect, about how to honor each other's roles in this family. I learned to accept Jasmine, flaws and all, while making it clear that love for my son didn't come with conditions. Slowly, Marcus and I began to see each other again.
really see each other. During this time, I also began to realize something important. My story, my pain, and my healing could serve a greater purpose. I started volunteering to share my experiences with other women who had felt abandoned or forgotten. At first, I spoke at small community gatherings. I told my story openly, hoping to give others the courage to speak theirs. The response was overwhelming. Women came up to me, tears in their eyes, saying how much they related, how much hope they found in my words. One day, the local community center asked me to lead a support group for older women who felt isolated or estranged from family. I was nervous but honored. I called it Strength and Sisterhood. Every week, we met in a sunlit room filled with chairs arranged in a circle. Women shared stories about lost children, broken marriages, and dreams deferred. We laughed, cried, and lifted each other up. The group became my second family. Around this time, Marcus and Jasmine surprised me with an invitation to their house for Thanksgiving. I felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. Would things be different? Would old wounds resurface? Walking into their house, I was greeted by the warm smell of collard greens and sweet potato pie. Tiana ran into my arms, giggling as if no time had passed. Jasmine smiled genuinely, her eyes soft and welcoming. That Thanksgiving dinner was the first of many steps towards healing and renewed family bonds. Yet, life wasn't perfect. There were still moments of tension, misunderstandings, and hurt feelings. But each time, we chose to talk rather than walk away. Marcus's family had changed, but the love that bound us was stronger than the trials. One afternoon, I found myself reflecting on how far I had come. The woman who once felt abandoned and forgotten was now standing taller, proud and whole. I had rediscovered my voice, reclaimed my purpose, and redefined what family meant to me. With newfound confidence, I began writing my memoir. I wanted to tell my story, not just my pain, but my triumphs, my struggles, and my joy. The book wasn't just for me, it was for every woman who felt invisible or unloved. Writing was cathartic. It helped me make sense of my journey and turn my pain into power. The memoir caught the attention of a local publisher, and before I knew it, I was invited to speak at events and conferences. People resonated with my story, a story of resilience, faith, and the unbreakable spirit of a mother's love. One of the most rewarding moments came when a young woman approached me after a speech and said, "Lillian, your story gave me hope. I'm going through something similar with my family, and you showed me that I'm not alone." Hearing that made every tear, every struggle worth it. At 68 years old, I am no longer defined by abandonment or silence. I am a mother, a grandmother, a writer, a speaker, and a friend. But most importantly, I am a woman who refused to be broken. My journey isn't over. There will be days when the pain resurfaces, when doubts creep in. But now I have tools, faith, community, and self-love to face whatever comes. To anyone watching this and feeling lost, remember, your story matters. Your pain is valid, but so is your power. You can rise, you can heal, and you can create a new chapter filled with love, hope, and strength. Full circle. Legacy, love, and new beginnings. As the seasons changed, so did the rhythm of my life. The sharp edges of pain softened with time, replaced by a quiet strength that carried me forward. At 69 years old, I found myself standing in a place I never imagined, not just healed, but thriving. The Thanksgiving dinner with Marcus, Jasmine, and Tiana had opened a door that I thought was permanently closed. Since then, our family had been slowly knitting itself back together, thread by thread. We had our ups and downs. Some days still carried old wounds, but the love underneath was undeniable. Marcus was learning to balance his roles as husband, father, and son. Jasmine, too, had grown. We talked more openly, respecting boundaries, but never forgetting the ties that bound us. One afternoon, Marcus called me, excitement in his voice. "Mama, I want you to come to the church next Sunday. There's something I want you to see." Curious, I agreed. Sunday morning arrived crisp and bright. The church was filled with familiar faces from the choir, the community center, and even some new friends I'd made along the way. Marcus stood at the pulpit, nervous but steady. "I want to introduce you all to the woman who raised me," he began, his eyes scanning the crowd until they landed on me. "Lillian taught me what love really means: sacrifice, resilience, and faith. She's my mother, my inspiration, and the heart of our family." Tears filled my eyes as the congregation burst into applause. I felt seen, honored, and deeply loved. That day marked a new chapter, not just for me, but for all of us. The family that had once fractured was healing, stronger, and more united. But my journey wasn't just about mending fences. It was about creating a legacy, a story of hope for the women who came after me. I continued writing my memoir, now filled with stories of forgiveness, growth, and triumph. The publisher wanted to feature it in a national campaign celebrating Black women's resilience. At book signings and events, I met women from all walks of life, mothers, daughters, grandmothers, who shared their own stories of pain and healing. Each conversation reminded me that my story was bigger than me. I also expanded the Strength in Sisterhood group, turning it into a community organization dedicated to supporting women over 60 who faced loneliness and family estrangement. We hosted workshops on financial independence, health, and self-care. We organized retreats where women could connect, laugh, and reclaim joy. One afternoon, as I sat with Rosa and Marlene, we looked out over a garden we had helped plant in the community park. The flowers bloomed in vibrant colors, a symbol of new life and hope. Rosa smiled and said, "Look at what you've grown, Lillian. This garden, this group, this new family you've built." I nodded, feeling a deep sense of peace. It started with a broken heart, but sometimes that's where the greatest strength grows. At home, Tiana blossomed into a bright, confident young girl. I became her biggest cheerleader, attending school plays, helping with homework, and sharing stories of our family's past. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the stars, she looked at me and said, "Grandma, you're my hero." In that moment, I understood the true power of love. Not perfect, not without pain, but fierce and unwavering. As for Marcus and Jasmine, they invited me to be part of more family decisions, respecting my role as grandmother and mother. We celebrated holidays together, shared meals, and created new traditions. The road wasn't without bumps, but the journey was ours to walk, together. Looking back, I see now that abandonment was not the end of my story. It was a painful detour on a path that led me to self-discovery, purpose, and renewed love. I learned that family isn't just about blood or proximity. It's about connection, forgiveness, and the willingness to grow. So, if you're listening to my story and feel abandoned or forgotten, hear me when I say this. Your life is not over. Your worth is not diminished. There is power in your pain and beauty in your healing. Rise up, find your voice, build your family, whether it's the one you were born into or the one you create. Because no matter your age, no matter your past, your story can still be a story of hope, love, and strength. And that's the story of Lillian, a woman who was abandoned but who refused to be broken.